Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Hello?
Hello, yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I do apologize. For some reason, as a panelist, I couldn't get in. And so now we're here. And how many people are here today? My name is Francine Kolabankole, and I'm your chair. And I do apologize for being extremely late, but I've been trying for 30 minutes to get in. So let's go ahead and get started. I see only two screens open. And may I ask who is here today?
This is Li Fang.
Wonderful, very good. Is there anybody else online? Is there anybody else online? Because this is getting to be a little bit problematic, I think. Okay. I don't know if anybody else is having the same problem I did this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Tolulope Oladimeji Sobowale.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so I have two people. That's wonderful. According to the program, I think you're first. So would you like to go ahead, Dr. Sobowale? Would you like to go ahead and make your presentation?
No problem.
Okay, wonderful. Good. I see Dr. Babatunde Onikoye is online. That's wonderful. So at least we've got three panelists. I believe because we only have three, we could probably each speak for about 10 minutes. Is that okay? And then that way we'll have enough time to answer questions. Okay, great. Please go ahead and get started, sir.
Next. Thank you. I'm happy that you were able to attend this panel. The title of my paper is Auchi ASCOO Welded Metal Sculpture Practice in the History of Contemporary Nigerian Art. In modern Nigerian art, Zaria ASCOO is the acclaimed art movement that springs out of a former art institution in the late 1950s. The school final students were tagged the Zaria Rebels simply because they were able to decolonize themselves from Euro-American visual yardstick, because all their lecturers were foreigners as at that time, and they imposed Western canon on their students. But in the late 1950s, Uche Okeke led the students of the department to reject the idea of Western visual style. And he encouraged his colleagues to adopt the forms in their cultural background. And that continues like that. The movement embraced Africanism forms, which later spread to other art institutions. The aim of this study is to bring to fore Auchi ASCOO phenomenon welded metal sculpture practice and place it in the right perspective in contemporary Nigerian art. What is an ASCOO? An art school is an institution where visual art practice is taking place. And this is of two types. Institutional. Institutional art school is formal in nature. There is an entry curriculum, there is an exam to take on a periodic before the student graduates. Why that of ideological art school is that of group of artists with share interest in representing and presenting their visual art to the public. And Auchi Art School belongs to these two classifications because Auchi Art School has a former art department where they were training students. And at the same time, Auchi Art School have an existing ideological art school. The school was established in 1973, and its location was at the beginning in Benin City. But in 1977-78 session, the school was moved from Benin to its present location, Auchi Town. And in getting to Auchi Town, the school again was upgraded from 2 years diploma to include an additional 2 years for their HND programs, which makes it 4 years. And at that time, the school was, because of the upgrading, the Department of Art, which is the School of Art and Design, was moved out of the initial faculty, which is Business Studies, and they became autonomous. Because of the upgrading, the school has no choice than to employ more hands to tutor their HND classes. And at this time, Elise Temile Erimono, a Zaria product, a sculptor, was brought in to join the staff teaching strength. On getting to Auchi, he discovered that something is missing. And therefore, he exhibited the spirit of revolution in the Zaria Art School on his students by encouraging the students to embrace the idea of phenomena. And he encouraged them to do something that is unusual, but acceptable to the people. And because of that, in 1981, his phenomenal idea came into limelight through the work of one of his HND students who chose to exhibit sculpture. And this work of that first sculpture student is the guitarist, is a cubist form. And since that, other students, graduating students, started exploring art. They are exploring their weathered metal art. The one in the middle is an hybrid assemblage work because it is both found objects and the one they created on the rider is an hybrid. So at that time, it is Auchi Art School that are actually consistent in doing this. And because they were conscious of the fact that they were exploring Western medium, they still need to stick to their cultural background. They must allow the forms in their cultural background to reflect. And you can see the lady with calabash is a milk melt from the northern part of Nigeria, while the woman with shekere obviously looks like those from the Niger Delta and the Southeast, while the drummer obviously shows a lifestyle of a Yoruba man. And while this is continuing, their experimentation continues to yield more beautiful new forms. The roster was produced by one of the lecturers who is also a former student of the Auchi Art School. he explores cutleries in producing this beautiful roaster. And that has become a norm in contemporary weathered metal sculpture in Nigeria. Also, initially, when they are representing their forms, it's plain, it is devoid of anatomy. But if you look at this horse produced by Luke Iyora around 2015 or thereabout, you can actually feel a sense of life in the horse because the artist was able to beat the metal as if he's working with clay. Also, their practice continued. In 2014, Isaac produced this fish seller using mold technique. That is, instead of casting and charging is positive using either concrete or fiberglass or bronze, he explored nuts, which is very, very unusual to produce this fish seller. Also, their exploration still continue. The drummer is also from mold, but the material used is spark plugs used by vehicles and some electronics machines that are petrol drive or diesel. Also, the strive continue to seek for new forms, new technique. In 2020, Stephen Ekpenesi produced this hunter's dog using stripes and succeeded in manipulating the stripes to bring out forms to give a realistic form. It's not moving here. What happened? At the same time, their exploration also yield a situation whereby weathered metal could actually be used to produce portraits in a realistic manner. This one was produced by Omodewe in 2022. And obviously, anybody that knows Abameda, Fela Anikulapo, will surely knew this is Fela and nobody but Fela. That has never been before until these people keep on experimenting and they are getting results. The next figure to this one is direct guided weathered metal sculpture, in which after a clay work has been done to taste, instead of casting it using concrete or any other materials, the positive was taken directly from the finished modeled image. And that again was pioneered by the Auchi Art School weathered metal artists. Their consistency in propagating weathered metal sculpture has sustained its practice. They are highly experimental. Their works have vivid of natural synthesis. That is, when you see their works, you can relate the work with Nigerian socio-cultural life, rather than tilting towards that of the Western culture. Their influence is noticeable in the works of artists from other art institutions. Worthy of note is that the sculptors, through their work, have succeeded in coining an identity, what's being referred to as an ideological group within the existing Auchi Art School, because Auchi Art School is well known for their coloristic and expressionist painting. That is what everybody knows Auchi Art School for. Until now, if you are talking of Auchi Art School, the focus of everybody will be on the painters. Meanwhile, the sculptors are also doing excellently, but they were neglected. You can't find any information pertaining to the weathered metal sculpture in any scholar work like this work is trying to do. So with what I've shown so far, I believe their efforts worth documenting in the practice of weathered metal sculpture. More so, if you are practicing weathered metal sculpture and you refuse to key in into the forms and style of this selected artists from this school, gallery owners they are likely going to frown at you. They will tell you, we are doing business with artists. So if you are going to bring works to us, we are paying bills. If your work does not conform with these ones, we are not going to accept your work to be displayed for sales in our gallery. And because of that, a lot of artists, including myself, have no choice than to key in into the method of Auchi ASCII weathered metal sculpture. That is just what it is now in Nigeria. They have influenced, they are already dominating everywhere. If you brought a work, the first thing a collector will ask of you, except if he or she knows your background, is that, did you finish from Auchi? If you say no, they will be wondering that how come you are able to do this. So through the effort of this metal sculpture from the school, they have succeeded in coining a name for themselves to be referred to as an ideological art school, making Auchi Art School to have existing two arts movements. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to move on to the next person, and I don't know who wants to go next. So you're more than welcome. Is Ms. Zhang, are you available?
Yeah, I can.
Would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, wonderful.
I also need to share my screen.
Please do.
But the screen is still there, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you needing some help to do that?
No, I think I'm fine.
Wonderful.
You can
Great.
see my screen, right?
Okay, very good.
Okay, so let me put it. Yeah. So hello, good morning, everyone. Online and also in Lagos. My name is Li Fang Zhang, and I'm currently a PhD student in South Africa. I'm based in Johannesburg. So this is the topic today, looking at the idea of contemporary through the work by artist Tafuma Gucha. The title is a bit ambitious because this is the only work that I'm going to discuss, titled The Odd Coupling, which was created in the early 1990s. As seen in the image, the piece is composed of wood, stone, and a blue table. The wood is joined by the stone pointing towards different directions, although the work appears to be a sculpture resting on the table. The table is actually part of it. And it was first shown at Tafuma's solo exhibition in New York, titled Seeking Permission in 1996. And I want us to keep this work in mind while we move on. So to start with, I would like to briefly introduce the artist Tafuma Gucha. Born in 1956, he has been practicing as an artist for over half a century, actually. He was trained at missionary school in wood carving in 1978, and then also started stone sculpting in 1979 to move on. So in 1982, he had an exhibition at Gary Delta in Harare, where he presented a new body of work with mixed media, mainly wood and stone. The exhibition was kind of groundbreaking at that time because in colonial Rhodesia, especially since 1950s, stone sculpture or Shona sculpture had become a dominated art form in the country and also attained fame in the international art market promoted by Frank McEwen, the founding director of the Louisiana National Gallery. Stone sculpture was often associated with the narrative of spirits of stone. So, of course, many scholars have complicated the term Shona sculpture as an invented tradition or modern art movement with the colonial agent. But until the 1980s and the early years of Zimbabwe's independence, it was still quite dominated in the art scene, especially Black artists, actually. So the gallerists of Gary Delta, they still they record how the audiences were surprised by Gucha's mixed media work. So Gucha was also awarded an art scholarship from the British Council to study in London in 1982. So as a sculptor, Gucha not only broke the single media convention of stone sculpture by using mixed media and exploring different forms, he also broadened the sculpture's subject matter, shifting from the motif of spirit of stone towards social issues and urban lives in the 1980s. And through late 1980s to 1990s, his work presented a strong sense of social concern. So this is one of the work that is in memory of the mining disaster. And now let's move to the idea of contemporary art. So in this book on Zimbabwe art, the museum curator and researcher Farai Chabata opens his text on the transformation from Zimbabwe's independence in the 80s entering this century with the proposition that the notion of contemporaneity in Zimbabwe art could be attributed to the advent or inception of mixed media in the country. If we read this claim in light of Gucha's work, we could possibly identify Gucha as one key figure contributing to the process of becoming contemporary in Zimbabwe art. However, considering the basic dictionary meaning of the word contemporary, this argument will lead us to further questions, as it reveals that being contemporary is beyond merely being in the current time. Indeed, what does contemporaneity entail in arts of Zimbabwe and in the broader context of Africa? This notion of contemporary are addressed by art historians such as Sidney Casper, Chika Okeke Agulu, and Okwe Mwezo. Because all these art historians, they refer to Terry Smith, who constantly grapple with the meaning of contemporary art, especially his 2009 publication, What is Contemporary Art? And his Terry Smith contentions in this book emphasize on the temporality of contemporary, which have three core meanings, and based on that, he also provides a description of the world picture at that time and the main talents of art by shaped by the conditions of the contemporary world. And drawing from Smith's contemporality, which means the coexistence of distinct temporalities, Sidney Casper unpacks the notion of contemporary and highlights the continuity and the transformation of artist practices, especially before and after the independence era, and a pairing of Western-driven medias and local approaches. So to acknowledge the continuing presence of one in the other. So in Casper's word, contemporary art in Africa has developed through a process, what she refers to as bricolage. And building on and also shifting from Casper's contention, Mwezo and Okeke Agulu approach the notion also by drawing inspiration from Terry Smith's concerns about time and Danto's assertion of the end of styles or the end of historical periods bound to styles. Briefly, contemporary African art is post-colonial in terms of time and a liberation from the periods strictly bound with traditional art styles. They further complicate the contemporary as a hybridized space of practices in relation to the shifting discursive landscape on African art, like from the ethnographical museums to the Museum of Art and also its connections and tensions with the archives of traditions. So from historical points of view, all these writers point out the significance of 1980s as the time of profound transformation. In this period, roughly from the late 1980s, artists from African countries also gained more attention and also exhibited increasingly in the international art world. Tafuma Gucha was also among the continent's significant up-and-coming artists within this trend, participating in many seminar, art exhibitions, and events in the 1990s. He was part of this touring exhibition, titled as in the catalog shows, and he was selected to represent art from sub-Saharan African countries in the African countries pavilion at Venice Biennale for the first time, alongside like Nigerian artists such as El Anachi and Bruce Onobrake. Yeah. So in Chika Okeke Aguru's more recent publication in the African artists from 1882 to now, he identified two main events in this period as the drives of contemporary African art, namely Triangle Art Workshop and the rise of artist groups. So Tafuma Gucha also extensively involved in both of them. So different from most West African countries like Nigeria that attained independence in the 1960s, Zimbabwe claimed its statehood in the 1980s. It means that Zimbabwe became contemporary right at its independence, as Zimbabwe art became post-colonial in terms of time and also diverged from the single media paradigm in terms of style. So, and also encountered the expansion of the global art world in the 1980s. And as in this so artists such as Tafuma Gucha confronted on not only issues of traditional and modern, colonial and post-colonial in the local context, but also the world picture of globalization, in inequity, and the region of representations as described by Terry Smith. It is in this context I want us to look at Tafuma Gucha's odd coupling again. So we could reaffirm that Tafuma Gucha's work pronounced the contemporaneity of Zimbabwe art in terms of time and his bold attitude in departing from the expected modernist style of stone sculpture by Black Zimbabwe artists before and around the independence era. The title Odd Coupling also reminds us the notion of contemporaneity and bricolage, or the mismatchiness, as mentioned previously. If you look closely, you might realize that Gucha's reference to the table pieces by Antony Caro, a significant sculptor of modernism sculpture in the 20th century. So Antony Caro created hundreds of these intimated scale pieces which involved tabletop and were mostly made from industry materials like steels. Gucha also acknowledged his familiarity with Caro's work. So similar as artists all around the world who are traveling, exchanging, and sharing ideas, Tafuma Gucha also draws inspiration from different art traditions for fresh artistic expression to push beyond boundaries. Yet by painting the table in his signature blue at that time and using the local materials that carries loaded meaning in Zimbabwe art, Gucha marked a personal registration in his move into conceptual abstraction. By doing so, he consciously inserted himself into an interrelated space of sharing and exchanging, and situated himself in the contemporary. And meanwhile, he was also conscious of the new circumstance or the geopolitics of the institutionalized global art world through which contemporary art presents itself. This is evident in the playful and provocative title of this exhibition, Seeking Permission. As he stated, he needs permission from the West to pronounce him as an artist. So let me conclude. Tafuma Gucha's work in the 1980s not only embodied the contemporaneity of Zimbabwe art, but also demonstrate his agency as an artist in inserting himself into this hybridized space of practices and asserting this particular temporality and spatiality of the contemporary. Yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These two presentations are really pretty interesting in the sense that we're all talking about what happened no longer coupled to colonial ways of looking at art. I think that's actually very wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. Turn on his microphone. Now I see that you're here, and you were very kind to send me your bio. And it's a very extensive bio. And what I will say is that he is a researcher and a lecturer at the film department at the University of Regina in Canada, where he teaches global Southern and transnational African cinema. And he has taught quite extensively. He has many essays on the subject. And so without further ado, would you like to go ahead and get started? We have probably about 10-15 minutes, and then we want to give enough time for a roundtable discussion. So are you ready to go on?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Professor Bankole, thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I had to come in late. I mean, it's 4 a.m., so I had to practically drag myself out of the bed, so so it's nice to see everyone. I would like to share my screen now.
Wonderful.
I hope I'll be able to do that. I mean, with all the technological advancement going on.
Well, this morning has been interesting because I too was late. I couldn't get in, and I'm a panelist, so you're in good company. This morning has been quite interesting.
Thank you. Not sure. Okay. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
I can't even find it. Okay, so here it is. Okay. I have a few slides to show, and this slides are actually running to like they're running to like 7:14. And the title of my work this morning is Safeguarding Cultural Heritage, the Context of Transnational African Screen Media. And in this case, I am actually speaking about diasporic African cinema in the global north and how it crosses between the host and, of course, original countries. Anyway, what I'll be discussing this morning is not in any way diverse from the existing and ongoing research in transnational flows of media, African people, including filmmakers, and how they create transnational film stories in which characters negotiate African cultural traditions from their birth countries while integrating into host communities in new countries and continents. Sheila Petty, a renowned scholar of African cinema, noted that for more than 2 decades now, documenting displacement, movement and migratory flows of people, mostly from the global south, and their struggles to attain new citizenship has become a major preoccupation of many African filmmakers. The depictions of movement and journeys relate to people who reside majorly in the global south and are determined for several reasons to migrate from their homelands to the global north. In a much broader sense, these transnational experiences among African people have contributed to defining transnational cinema as an idea in film studies that explores a wide range of theories which explain the effects of globalization over the cultural and economic aspect of film. Studies in the theory and practice of transnational cinema have also constituted critical debates and the influences of third cinema, nationalism, post-nationalism, production, reception, exhibition, and the impacts of film, cinema, and filmmakers that have crossed national and international boundaries. Scholars like Ibe and Songwei Lee see transnational cinema as a branch of film studies which relate to the work on diasporic, exilic, and post-colonial cinema, which aims through its analysis of the cinematic representation of cultural identity to challenge Western constructs of nation and national culture, and by extension, national cinema as stable and Eurocentric in its ideological norms, as well as its narrative and aesthetic formation. To the African, migration, exile, and residing in diasporic societies are peculiar. This is because of the horrible and deplorable state of the continent, which forces many to seek a better life abroad. Daniel Arisi has stressed that migration, which can be viewed as a physical dislocation, can become a metaphorical, perceptive, and ontological movement, as well as a change in position that allows new view and a shift in one's identity that transforms vision and shapes narratives. As African filmmakers, they straddle at least two countries, cultures, and languages, and they strive to prove their self-worth and humanity in the face of systemic prejudices. Their films, however, demonstrate that a new template for successful identity construction is possible in the host country when characters safeguard African cultural heritage, values of community and respect, and transpose these values into and virtues into new context. Okay, for the purpose of clarity and coherence, I will examine the representations of safeguarding cultural heritage in the film of a transnational filmmaker named Danny Kuyate. The title of the film is Mida Vileva, which is translated into English as While We Live. My presentation will draw inspiration from Hamid Nafisi's concept of accented cinema, which defines transnational and diasporic films as possessing a collective memory and multiple identities, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o's concept of global ethics, which defines how phenomena such as oral performances, festivities, culture, and languages manifest in a global sense. By applying Nafisi's and Ngugi's theories to the above film, I will analyze the aesthetics, the narrative, and the aesthetic structures through a plethora of plots, characters, spectacles, cinematography, to uncover their cultural significances. This analysis will lead to my proposed theory, aesthetics of contiguity, a concept that offers innovative ways to understand coexistence and mutual relations in a global context through the safeguarding of one's cultural heritage and community values. Okay, I will just briefly say a few words about Hamid Nafisi's exilic accented cinema. Hamid Nafisi's theory of accented cinema has focused on diasporic and post-colonial cinemas, which were examined through various analyses of the cinematic languages and images of cultural identity, while subverting the hegemony that Western culture is known for. Accented filmmakers normally operate independently outside the studio system on the mainstream film industry, using interstitial and collective modes of production that criticize these entities. As a result, they are presumed to be more prone to tensions of marginality and difference. Global ethics by global, okay, I'll just move over to Ngugi wa Thiong'o's global ethics. Global ethics, according to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, is described as the theory and politics of knowing. Global ethics extends Ngugi wa Thiong'o's views in his earlier work, which globalizes the local and the indigenous as existing in the global arena and visible to those who are able to recognize them, whether local languages, film of Africa, or literature illustrating African themes or belief systems at the art of of Ngugi wa Thiong'o's theory. Global ethics is the global visibility or visibleness of Africans in the world. That is, to use Mary Helen Hedgen's term, the recognition of the local content, element, features, and tropes must be acknowledged at the global arena. This is why Ngugi wa Thiong'o says the following: on the surface of the globe, there is no one center. Any point is equally a center. Relating this phenomenal notion to the lives of the immigrants in diaspora, in this case, Africans and their artistic expression, there is an intriguing understanding that between the immigrant and the host citizen, there is no difference, or there should be no difference between both identities, except in terms of color. Okay. All right, so I will move into my brief analysis, illuminating aesthetics of contiguity in Danny Kuyate's Midden Lever, Safeguarding Cultural Heritage in Diaspora. Danny Kuyate's Midden Lever, it centers around the life of Candia, who lives and works as a nurse in Sweden. The film illustrates the conflict she has with her son, Ibrahim, who is aspiring to be a musician. The 18-year-old Ibrahim is a mixed-race boy whose father, now deceased, is Swedish. Candia's mother-in-law, Ylva, neither likes Candia nor approves of the relationship between Candia and her late son. This dislike is actually based on color prejudice. Olaf, Candia's father-in-law, is more accepting and tolerant of Candia. Seko is a taxi driver in Sweden and also from Gambia, who acts as an intermediary between Candia, Ylva, and Olaf. At the same time, he performs the role of a foster father to Ibrahim. Ibrahim contends with his own identity. His squabble with his mother, who wants him to be responsible and go to work, sparks a provocation in him as he pushes his mother to the ground. Ibrahim wants to be a hip-hop musician, and Candia wants him to be more responsible and take on a proper job. This illustrates how the life desires of young people differ radically from what their parents want for them in the 21st century. Candia seeks the help of Seko, who summons Ibrahim to his house and warns him of the consequences associated with disrespecting his mother. This singular cultural effort instigates a reconciliatory process between mother and son. Candia decides to go to Gambia in order to be with her family for a year. Upon finding out about his mother's departure, Ibrahim also decides to go to Gambia to look for her. Upon arriving in Gambia, Candia reunites with her family, but learns about her brother's Modu's refusal of the relationship between her niece, Sekuna, and a young aspiring local musician. Modu condemns the relationship because the young man is from a less privileged family. The refusal of her brother to sanction the relationship between Sekuna and her lover reminds Candia of the rejection she suffers from Ylva, a white mother-in-law who sees her as inferior. Soon, Ibrahim arrives Gambia, finds his mother. He unites with his family, cousins, uncles, and aunts, as well as his African roots, which he encounters for the first time. Upon realizing that she feels lost among her own people, Candia decides to leave for Sweden again, much to the chagrin of Ibrahim, who decides to stay back, having found love and acceptance among his own people in Africa. Midden Lever comes in form of a simple linear plot and projected timelines through occasional representation in dreams and visions of Ylva. Flashback within the main narrative complements the subject's matter of the story, which reminds us of Laura Mark's theoretical model of enfolding and unfolding knowledge. Mark stressed that the past persists enfolded in virtual form, and some of its facets may unfold to some degree in the present. In Midden de Lever, Candia is an important character trope performing dual functions. It is illustrative that filmmakers in diaspora, as Nafisi stressed, are not just textual structures or fictions within their films. They are also empirical subjects situated in the interstices of culture and film practices, and they exist outside and prior of their film. What this implies is that Danny Kuyate offers characters that elicit the kind of anxiety and challenges, hope, and desires as figures in exile. Also, his production modes rely on multiple cultures that he embodies. For instance, in the film, much like his mother, Ibrahim also contends with the issue of identity and struggles to find relevance and space for himself, even in diaspora, where he was raised as from childhood. In the film, a medium shot, as you can see from my slide, a medium shot reveals Ibrahim pushing his mother to the ground based on conflicting desires. In another medium shot, we see Ibrahim visit Seiko to tell him about the altercation between him and his mother. Seiko, who performs the role of an adopted brother of Kandir and a surrogate uncle to Ibrahim, advises Ibrahim of the consequences of disrespecting his mother from the point of view of an Africa well-informed in the ways of African people. Another shot reveals Seiko offering a piece of kola nut, which Ibrahim is advised to give to his mother in order to appease her and ask for her forgiveness. Both Ibrahim and Seiko share equal space in the frame, and sit side by side facing the camera. The camera suggests a very African-centered aesthetics, which is reminiscent of African theatrical style. The camera functions as cultural bearer of truth and knowledge specific to the mores and norms of a people. The camera, again, also functions as a didactic instrument that teaches moral instructions and offering good counsel for ideal upbringing. Like their filmmakers, these shots, as I have argued elsewhere, play the role of cultural career by evoking elements of the African world and the subversive and then subversively transformative elements of modernism and postmodern lifestyle in an already threatened cultural ambience. The characters in the film enlighten and broaden audiences' understanding about how community and communal living help to suggest strategies through which a society can make progress, creating understanding, settling disputes, and sustain friendship and display respect to one another. These cultural activities or norms are embedded within African cosmology and the reservoir of strong traditional principles which have existed for a long time and can only be sustained through collective oneness. Such collective decisions keep cultural heritage alive, and this can be accomplished through communication. For Ngugi, communication is a synchronon for culture, and it creates culture. Culture is a means of communication, and like language, it is inseparable from ourselves as community of human beings with a specific form and character, and a specific history, and a specific relation to the world. Ibrahim in the film is unaware of the culture of his mother because he was raised in Sweden. He is ignorant and consequently alien to the cosmology of the African people. This alienation, according to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, has resulted in the dissociation of the sensibility of a child from his natural and social environment. And thus, since culture is a product of history of the people, which it in turn reflects the child, is then exposed exclusively to a culture that was a product of a world external to him. I will just take you to the end, of the entire work. Okay. Now, here is the last slide I will show you, and then I will now call it a day. Upon returning to Sweden, Candia is informed by Seko of Yilva's poor health condition. Shocked to the bone marrow, she requests Seko to drive her to the hospital. On getting to the hospital, Candia is speechless as she peers at Yilva on the bed. When Candia and Yilva see each other, the feeling to embrace one another and put their differences aside is mutual. They both hold hands to signify a sense of acceptance, forgiveness, friendliness, and contiguity. Candia buries her anger in order to allow love to thrive at the moment. Yilva, on the other hand, is helpless and full of regret. Yilva's facial expression is indicative of one who seeks forgiveness for her sins. This image of Yilva and Candia's linked hands is a strong signifier which functions in semiotic terms. Not only does the expression of contiguity between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law reveal a reconciliatory gesture, but it also visually expresses racial bonding, most felt in a time of need and hopelessness. My aesthetics of contiguity in the image is the most emotional in the film. Kouyaté blends Western emotional and psychological and personal with African community social space group and presenting an option that takes place in each continent. Here also lies the idea of Nafisi's accented cinematic trope and an attitude which is, according to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in globalatical terms, germane to a global consciousness of our common humanity. In Midden de Lever, as a transnational film narrative in which cultural heritage is sustained through aesthetic elements that help the film accomplish the subject of cultural understanding, relational possibilities, and the need to coexist. But the film emphasizes specific cultural traditions to foreground the intentions of the filmmaker, which is to demonstrate African cultural worldviews, the sustainers of inherent world sense, and to create an understanding that subverts disrespect for others. It is a film in which Danny Kouyaté raises the consciousness of Africans and Afro-diasporans within the global flows of histories and seeking to challenge past, present, and future representation of Black society. My conclusion. Midden de Lever illustrates meaningfully images of the idea of communal relationship, which is steeped in the African tradition, while inspiring the concept of aesthetics of contiguity. The construction of the aesthetics of contiguity is derived from functional cultural expressions that are located in African worldview. These cosmological features promote mutual relations, respect for, and coexistence among the people of Africa. The aesthetics of contiguity in transnational African cinema is one that orchestrates the process of exhortation that can encourage mutual relationship in host communities in diasporic contexts. Transnational African filmmakers travel across the world on the strength of their works, creating images that define their existence and the conditions that either affect or influence their identities. They constitute the intersecting winds that sweep in and change the direction of currents in international arenas of cinema, according to Mary Helen James, 2015. Aesthetics of contiguity is a locally derived ethics that not only finds expression in films that represent the experiences of African people in a somewhat complex world, but one that is capable of shaping diasporic society, as in film, that have sustained ideas, notions, and ideologies that viciously encourage systemic racism, binary opposition, racial division, aversion, and repugnance. Thank you for your time.
All right, well, thank you very much. So let us, if you can unshare your screen, so then that way we can go back to the conference. And let's open this up for discussion. Are there any questions from the audience? Lafang, I was very interested in your artist, and I was very, what's the word I'm looking for? The idea of bricolage is very important, and bricolage goes all the way through all of the three presentations. Mr. Shobowale was talking about the Zaria Art School, and Babatunde Onukoye was talking about transnationalism. And you quote Sidney Casphere and Chika Okeke Agolu. Now, looking at all three presentations, do you have any comments on we can move past the way of talking? Wonderful that we have three different art traditions: Zaria, South Africa, and diaspora. I mean, there's nothing better than all three of these. So if anyone has a comment, this would be a wonderful time to make some remarks. Mr. Shobowale, do you have any comments that you would like to add at this point?
Yes, thank you. Well, my work is on Auchi Art School weathered metal practice. I started with Zaria because Zaria is the progenitor. Zaria Art School, they are the progenitors of art movement in Nigeria. And that spread down to other art institutions who believe in their idea of natural synthesis, that is reflecting your cultural background in your work. In discussion of art too, in most cases, it is always focused on the painters of any art school as far as Nigeria is concerned. And in Auchi, I discovered that they have a lot of weathered metal sculptors that are producing excellent works, and not only producing good works, in terms of techniques and material exploration, they top that aspects. And despite the fact that they are exploring what I can refer to as modern material, you can still see their cultural background reflecting in their sculptural pieces. And it is a pity that whenever Auchi Art School is being mentioned, the emphasis is always on their colorist, expressionistic approach that is imparted on the student by Ademola Adejumo, neglecting other aspects of the visual art from the Auchi Art School. So that is what actually inspired me, that, like Jacob Jari said, that an art school can have many other art schools within the existing one. And this an Auchi Art School weathered metal sculpture is a good example of Jari's assertion. And with what I've presented, it is obvious that Auchi Art School weathered metal sculpture practice are strong enough to be referred to as an ideological group like their painters. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Ms. Yang, what about your artist? I think it's pretty amazing, odd coupling. And he went to school, did he go to official art school, or was this work that he learned from his community, and how did he blend? He's doing his own natural synthesis as well, and he's creating bricolage. So I'm kind of interested in what else is he doing today? What is he doing today?
Oh, he's still practicing as an artist, and then based in a town like 2 hours from the capital city, Harare, building his residency space, and then also creating artwork with the surrounding materials and beyond. Yeah, so to get back to your question, he was trained in missionary school first, but then he went for a degree in London, fine art degree in London. Yeah.
Okay.
So getting back now, moving on. Moving on. I think like I got Dr. Sobowale, if I pronounce it correctly, point of digging the hidden and invisible stories in the art history. And then as a researcher myself, what I can say is that like I like to look at the artist agency. I think they have been practicing from a very early stage until now. Now, for me, it's like the time to learn from the artist, to look at their agency they haven't been talked about in the past, and then what they are doing today, like or in actually Mbembe's word, writing the self practice. Yeah, I think I can't answer a question as it's too
It's okay.
big, but I'm sure following the artists, they really provide a lot of different possibilities. Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Babatunde Onikoye, what if you were to talk about your work in relationship to what is going on in Nigeria, for example? Are there any parallels, or are there any breakthrough artists that are making films that talk about culture and place and belonging? Or do you have any people that you can think of that are doing similar work to some of these artists and these filmmakers?
Yes. Well, as you know, I actually dealt with Danny Kuyate, and Danny Kuyate, of course, as you know, is actually from Burkina Faso, and somehow found his way to the United States, and then now Paris, and then Sweden. So he's not just diasporic, but he also cuts across that transatlantic space, which you can actually think about when you move from one diasporic society to another. But coming back to your question, we have a good number of Nigerians who are actually making similar works in diaspora. People like Obi Emelenyon, who actually lives in London and has a plethora of work, to his credit. We also have people like Chinenye Anyeme, who is Igbo, but who is very much immersed into a culture. So what these people actually do is that each time they travel, once they migrate to diaspora, they don't just do this physically, they do it psychologically and if you like, spiritually as well, because each time migrants actually migrate into new countries and continents, they carry with them what actually embodies their cultural tradition and what essentially defines their cosmology and worldview. And once they arrive at diaspora, they tend to negotiate, with whatever it is that they experience. There's this identity shift, and it always reflects in their cinema. However, because they have to contend with the systemic racism, they usually find that nezox, that bridge that could specifically help them to coexist with white people, or if you like, racists. I mean, they're all over the place now in the United States and indeed Canada. Of course, Canada has a way, and I say this with no apology, but Canada has a way of concealing its own kind of systemic racism, but it is there. It is ruthless, it is bad, and it is without a solitary point. But then what these filmmakers do is that while they criticize this racial exigencies and ugliness and what have you, they try to pitch in their work that avenue for coexistence, that avenue to make whites actually realize that there is a need for them to accommodate, to be more accommodating, and to show forth that they have a culture, and the culture is that they essentially build and work on the principle of equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Okay.
So if these principles are particularly laid out in these countries that that call themselves developed, or that offer a diasporic space, then there is the need for them to understand that everything that has to do with racial discrimination, racial prejudices should be nipped in the mud. And I'll say one thing. I actually did a panoramic study of the population in Canada, while I was working on my research, and 2 other books which I am working on now.
May I interject? I'm sorry. We only
please.
have about 10 more minutes, and we have a couple of questions, and there's a question directly for you. And the question was, what was the original language of the film that you showed that was based in Sweden? And how did the shooting of the film on location affect the way everything was laid out?
Well, it's basically, the work was actually produced majorly in well, I don't know what they call it, but it was the language of Sweden, Swedish language, or if you like, Swedish.
Okay, so this is a Swedish, but your designer, your filmmaker is French, and so you had subtitles in what language?
You have subtitles in English.
Okay.
In English, and then of course parts of Gambia, a select few of people speaking the Gambian indigenous languages. And then you also had people like Candia was the character of Candia was specifically speaking English. Okay. She was more communicating in English. Okay. But people like Ibrahim, her son, was basically Swedish and English. Okay. Especially when he arrived to Gambia.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Shobowale, and the question comes from Mr. Tobelese, and he says he wanted to know if the arts of Auchi are accepted in other places outside of Nigeria, and how does the medical work that you see at Auchi, how is it accepted and translated over to other art schools within Nigeria?
Thank you. The truth of the matter is they are pathfinder in that aspect. And like I said in my presentation, as a wedded artist by myself, I have an experience that I have no choice than to key into, because I took my work to a gallery in 2002, and the owner of the gallery just simply told me, young man, I will collect what you brought for now, but after this, if the works you are bringing again cannot conform with these ones on display, please do not bring any work to my gallery. And considering the fact that you have to put bread on your table, you just have to blend along with what the market is accepting. And I am not the only one that has such experience. Therefore, and coupled with the fact that the Auchi artists are very prolific, and they are producing work on a daily basis in different forms and styles, that people, when they see it, they smile at it. Today, Fidelis Odogu is a well-known contemporary Nigerian artist who has exhibited his work in US and UK, to be precise. The same thing is applicable to Olu Amoda. He's also a welded metal sculptor from Auchi Art School. He has also traveled for residence and exhibiting his works all over the globe. And today, except you are very, very close or familiar with an artist's work in the aspect of welded metal practice, if you see works, generally, the first thing you will do is to slam that work as the product of an Auchi art school. And I believe that's what's documenting, most especially when it is more of three-dimensional forms than their painter counterparts who are exploring paint in their works in a form that the painter's work lay emphasis on color expression than forms. Forms matters to the sculptures. And when you see the works of the sculptors, you will definitely relate it with Nigerian socio-cultural life, unlike their painters. When you see their painters producing works, you can slam that work to be a product from China or from UK or from Canada, because Nigerian identity is missing in their work, unlike that of their sculptors' counterpart. Yet the sculptors were nowhere to be found in any scholarly work, except in newspaper reviews, comments, short comments on exhibition catalogs. So I think they deserve being given attention in a scholarly work of this nature. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shang, this brings up a question of sales for your artists. How is being an artist that can be sold to the international art market, has that affected your artist in what he produces? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because in the end, an artist needs to eat. A filmmaker needs to eat. So how does he market his work?
I'll say he didn't. Yeah, but also the circumstance, whether within the country or internationally, had been changed. Like now, actually, now he's living in where he was born. And then also, for example, even the way how he construct his independent art space, no matter now or the former tool, he also cooperate, for example, agricultural part to give the space some kind of resilience when there's like some urgent need in the economic crisis within the country. So if just talking about eating, there are different ways, especially for artists who are in difficult conditions. But in terms of his marketing part, like in a very early, like before this century, he did a lot of like international workshops and then a lot of international exhibitions, and some of those work was sold during those period. Now recently he's working with a gallery based in the city, Harare, but I'm not sure like what is going on with that part of marketing of his work now. Yeah.
And Mr. Onikoi, how do your filmmakers market their work?
Well, it depends. Well, it depends. Usually, most of them don't even bother about the market and someone else. Distribution offices, distribution companies may well take that on. Most of the time, many of them actually get funding from organizations regularly. I mean, for someone like Danny Kuyate, I mean, it's usual. I mean, the money flows into his account almost every now and then because of how far he has actually established himself. And then again, most of them actually go to the cinemas, which is what, if you like, Nollywood is already practicing now. That is, those who actually form the Nizoks of new Nollywood cinema, the new Nollywood filmmakers are actually bringing back the cinematic age that was established during the post-colonial era of Nigerian cinema, and if you like, the entire African cinema. So funding is something that actually comes regularly to filmmakers, and most of the time they don't really bother about exhibiting their films. Once they are able to shoot their films, they direct their works or give their works to distribution and exhibition companies who take care of that part.
Okay, very good. At this point, I'm going to ask the LSA people in Lagos, are there any questions from the audience who might have a question or two? We have about 4 more, and I want to make sure the audience has time to ask a question. Okay. Any audience questions? I see someone raise their hand in the back. So if you can get to a microphone very quickly, that would be deeply appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Kehinde Adepegba. My question is to Mr. Shubowale, and I want to ask, is it only the metal-welded sculpture of Aoshi that is to be reckoned with when we are talking about sculpture? Because metal is just a medium. Are they not also producing works in other sculpture medium? So that's the first question. The second question is the area of recognition of Aoshi metal sculptors. I mean, is it only, I mean, there are other artists who are doing great metal work, who do not have influence, direct influence with Aoshi. Can you share if there are artists like that?
Okay, just to let you know, we only have 2 more minutes. So if we can keep our responses short, that would be great.
Thank you
So,
very much.
Mr.
Let me start by saying that Aoshi art departments train their students to understand how to explore almost all media you can use to produce sculpture. For example, they are also into wood carving and alloy casting, that is bronze. What is more important here now is that how many are producing wood carving in Aoshi that is actually known in the art market? There are very few, and their influence is not known beyond the corridor of their school. The same thing is applicable to their cast metal. They tailor their cast metal towards that of Benin, and Benin tradition, metal tradition, has consumed their efforts. Unlike the welded metal sculpture, it is a matter of fact that other people are producing good metal sculptures, but not in the forms of the one the artists of Aoshi are producing. But what's the other question?
I'm sorry, we don't have time for it.
Nigeria producing works, but that their works does not actually, for now, for example, Dr. Popola is producing a very beautiful artwork and in the country presently, but his early work started from the forms. He shares similar forms with that of Aoshi, but what he's doing now is totally different. So, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all, everyone who presented today. We have unfortunately run out of time. We're going to be cut off in about 30 seconds. So thank you so much for attending this particular webinar. It has been very informative, and I appreciate everyone who participated. And all your works are very interesting, and I would like to keep in touch with you all to see how else and what else that you will be producing in the future. Okay, so thank you very, very much. And we have totally run out of time. So have a good afternoon or good morning, depending on what time zone you are in. And thank you to the international audience. And let us have a good day. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.